My name is Arnau Garcia. I'm going to present the work which I have been doing for the last 2 years in the context of what is a European Union funded postdoctoral grant, which put me in contact with the team that Cameron Petrie is directing in the University of Cambridge. And so there I had this opportunity for first time in my life to work in South Asian archaeology. So my work was focused on now I'm not anymore in Cambridge. I'm at the Catalan Institute of Classical Archaeology, and we continue with these collaborations with the team in Cambridge, and also with your team in Kerala and other institutions in South Asia. And which I am also developing a new European Union funded project. So that's so since Cameron, Alessandro, Sieta, and Frances have already introduced many aspects of the work that we are all developing in this context of the Two Rains project and the associate projects. That's very good. So I hope I could go quicker, and you all have an idea of what are we are trying to combine there. So just this first slide to point to this area in the present Pakistani province of Punjab, where I'm focused my study. So the idea of my work, which I extremely oversimplified in this slide, is to work with the main idea that okay, we have a very strong and long-term settlement, urban or network or urban settlements in the Indus Basin, which of course these settlements and also all the activities that they develop in terms of agriculture, of crafting, or general water supply, etc., needs water. So since this area is relatively dry, and many or an important part of this water came through the rivers. These rivers came from the Himalaya, and they allow to provide of water to all this region. What is interesting is that neither the settlement, neither the rivers, let's say, are homogeneous in either in time or in space. So we know that during certain periods there seems to be more occupation in some areas. In other periods we have occupations in other areas. Also, we know that the rivers have not been always in the same place, because they continually move because of the dynamics of the seasonal rains, tectonic activity near the Himalayas, etc., etc. So, well, as you all are aware, the Himalayas feed rivers are now divided into main basins: the Indus Basin, which is what we are focusing now, and the Ganga Basin. In the middle, there is this Gagar Hakra, which there's a general idea that at some point some of these rivers from the Himalaya had also the water has going through this area. So this is more or less the general context of the research, which was basically working this relationship between this urban network and the hydrographic or the river network. So for that, my work was based on the idea of trying to map the elements or the archaeological elements that could help us to understand these dynamics. So our work was focused on two main sources. One are the satellite collection, which Francesc has talked extensively, and also Cameron has introduced before. In this sense, we have been published different of the methods that we are using for basically to enhance or to treat or to modify the raw data, and how highlight the things of archaeological interest, and how to extract information. So I put here different of our publications in which the methods are described, and you have also in some cases the code that is needed to also replicate the analysis that we are doing. The same for the historical maps, which was the other main sources that we are being using. And we are also, of course, using all the available archaeological databases, and also data from fieldwork. So from all these sources, what we are trying to achieve is basically, and what I'm presenting today is basically a work of mapping. So in one side, we are producing maps of potential settlements, and on the other side, we are producing maps of abandoned or dry river channels. So that's the main framework of our work. So this is basically a work in progress. So we are creating these two data sets, which of course they can be combined in a GIS environment to analyze the relationship between both. So at the moment, this work is done based on remote sensing. So the idea is to remotely produce what are basically, so in terms of archaeological research, are basically exploratory tools. So the idea is that you can have a data set, for example, of the potential sites in an area that you are interested, and so you can use this data then to prepare, develop your hypotheses, to plan or to help during the fieldwork surveys, and also there are tools that can be also interesting on the field of heritage management. For instance, Francesc has presented already some of these techniques to assess how recent changes in the landscape might be affecting the archaeological sites. So we could combine these data sets with, so we can combine these data sets to see if the sites that we are detecting are being in danger or not, right? So this is as I said, this is the main framework of the work. So in my presentation now, I'm going to go a bit detail of how we are working with the map, basically with the historical maps, and what we are exactly extracting as a potential archaeological sites. And then I will introduce a bit few ideas, few examples or small study cases, basically as a kind of a small demonstration of how this data could be used in researcher and for different researchers that might be interested on that. So we have been developing so our first test area. So we decide to test this so our objective is to map these features at the scale of all the Punjab territory, both in India and Pakistan, and also it can be extended to the Indus Basin in general. But so as a starting point, we decide to work in what is it corresponds more or less to the present district of Multan in Pakistan, which is basically the corresponds to the interfluvial area between the Ravi and the Sultej in the southern part. We were interested in this area because two main things. So first, it contains the different types of landscapes that you can find in this Indus Basin, or in the alluvial plains of the Indus Basin. So we have active floodplains, so the areas where the rivers now are passing and moving in different seasons or in different years. We have different old floodplains, so there are areas where we know that the rivers have been passing through in a recent or so in the past. We don't know how far in the past. And it contains also bars. The bars are a bit more elevated areas where have not been affected by the rivers for a much longer period. Probably not during the Holocene. So it's interesting to have a look at the descriptions that the historical sources give to these areas, in particularly to the bars and the interfluvial areas. Here I put an example, which basically they talk of areas of. So there was a clear distinction between the areas more close to the rivers, which were more occupied by agriculture, and the areas farther from the rivers, which were occupied for different types of jungles, shrubs, and they were used more for herding than agriculture. So this contrasts a lot with the situation nowadays, which is much more homogeneous of irrigation agriculture. This was a consequence of long-term investment in different canals and irrigation schemes. Particularly during the British occupation, there was a huge interest and investment in creating a network of canals which covers now most of the plains. So this was supposed huge changes on the landscape. So the first step in every work, an archaeological work in this area, is to analyze exactly what was these changes caused, and so how this transformation has affected the archaeological record. So going on, as I said, I'm going to do a bit of introduction on how we are working with the historical maps and how we are producing this data set of potential archaeological sites from these historical maps. Well, Cameron has already introduced a bit this aspect. So we are working with the collections that are nowadays in the Cambridge University Library and the British Library, which were they were very nice to scan it. So we are collaborating with them with the scanning and georeferencing of these materials. And so once we have it, we can georeference, which means we can see it in a GIS environment, etc. We can start to extract information. We were particularly focused on the mounds. So during the elaboration of these maps, the cartographers were drawing many of the small mounds that they were around the territory. So sometimes they knew that they were archaeological sites, sometimes they didn't. But what is interesting is that in any case they were drawn, and since this in this area most of these small mounds in the plains actually corresponds to the remains of human occupation. This is a very rich and very interesting archaeological information. So we develop also since well, this, of course, these maps covers a large area, so they cover actually all the Indus Basin, and also there are maps, similar maps. For example, the same type of maps that the British were producing in India were produced by the French in the area of the Near East. And so in this work we also collaborate with people from the University of Durham, a team directed by Dan Lawrence, to see if we can use these techniques also in the French map. So with the idea that it's a kind of technique that can be used in many different parts of the world. So well, I put it here because so we, of course, we can map topographic features like the mounds in the Indian maps, but there is also other information that we can extract from these maps, which can be indirectly related to archaeological sites, like, for example, some types of toponyms. I put here the case of Tel from Syria, but also more direct information. So when they represent an archaeological site using conventional sites, so we can extract all this information. So one of the things that we have been working is in the automatization of this process. So the idea is to be able to extract this information from a very large data sets of maps, and we start by testing it in this area in Punjab. So here you can see an example of how these maps looks, and how after applying this automatic technique of extraction of information, we can be able to map all these mounds. So what is interesting here, as you can see, is that we are not only obtain the location, which usually when we do that manually, what we obtain is we do is just put a point in each mount. Here we also have the more or less the shape, and more important, the size, which that is very useful to then, for example, create thresholds to avoid the excessive noise that is introduced by these techniques, which introduce a lot of small features that might be similar to these mounts, but they are not actually real mounts. So I wanted to show you a bit of highlighting of some of the numbers that we are obtaining. This is in this area of Multan. So the automatic approach can extract a lot of features, but we have to take into account that many of these is just noise, and also that they were drawing some very small features that usually don't correspond to archaeological sites. So using our experience working with these maps in Haryana, we end up creating thresholds to extract from this first identification the ones that has more probabilities to be archaeological sites. So we can obtain this data set, which is it's not exactly a data set of archaeological sites, but is a data set of probabilities. So it's a probabilistic approach. So you have a map which in this area there is a high probability or a lower probability that there is an old or an ancient occupation. So so the results are quite good in terms that we managed to avoid many false positives, and also we are missing very few of these features that are represented in the maps. We also compare this data set with what we knew from previously known archaeological information. That was actually the other reason why we wanted to work in this area of Multan, is because area was surveyed by the during the Pakistan, the Punjab survey organized by the Directorate of Antiquities of Pakistan, directed by Rafiq Mughal in the 1990s, and also the team that is working in Harappa has developed a very strong activity in these areas, and they have published several of their surveys, as Cameron has shown before. So we have a robust field data that publish field data that we can use to assess a bit our methods here. It was interesting to compare our data set with the previous data set. At the end, we only could match around half of the sites that are in the previously known data sets. Only half of them are actually mounds in the map. So, of course, we are targeting only one type of archaeological feature, which is the ancient settlement that has developed this mound shape. But this is, of course, not the whole picture of the archaeology of the area. On the other hand, it was also interesting to see. So from this, so we had like probably around 500 high probability new sites just in this area. But this maybe is just a small fraction of the whole archaeology of the area. It was also interesting to check how they look, these areas in the. So we were using the present day aerial and satellite imagery, and we realized that two important things. The first is that many of these mounds that appear as mounds in the old maps, now they are occupied by modern buildings. Sometimes are villages, sometimes are just houses, and sometimes are cemeteries. And sometimes you can still see the mound, and other times you cannot see the mound. But what is interesting is that these potential archaeological sites are inhabited today. So it's probably going to be very important, what we could call the urban archaeology in the future to understand the archaeology of this area, because it's heavily occupied even today. The second aspect that is interesting is that the already known sites, the signs reported until now, basically based on field work, usually you can still see it in the aerial imageries. While when we see the sites that we have detected using the maps, we see that a larger percentage of that today they look just as an agricultural field, so you cannot see the remains of the site. That is very important because it shows that using the maps you can report, or you can find potential sites that are probably very difficult to see on the field, because the process of agriculture, building, etc., have somehow hidden or destroyed the remains. So there is here a work to assess also how this impact is if it has really destroyed the archaeological record, in the sense that you go there and there is nothing, or there is still remains of these sites that can be found. It cannot and it probably can only be found using this type of techniques that we have introduced. So we also use the same approach, the maps and the satellites, for the mapping the river channels. So here I just put you an example of how it looks more or less, and especially I wanted to point that the maps are very precise in that area. So they really mapped very well all the dry channels that they were in that moment. That means that more or less what we see in the maps is what we see in the satellites. So there is not many potential river channels that we see in the satellites and we don't see in the map. So in that sense, it was quite a surprise, at least for me, that the maps were so precise in that aspect. So this is a bit the result of everything. This is combining. Here the green circles are the detected archaeological sites. The triangles, the red triangles, are the previously known sites, the ones that were in recorded in the Punjab survey or the different or later works. And all these blue lines represent the different paleochannels. The dark blue lines are the active floodplains, as they were represented in the maps, and these brown lines are the limits of the bars. So there is where there is no river activity, let's say. So this is what we have produced, or what we are working. So the idea is to make this at some point these data sets will be available for researchers and for heritage management. And the idea is that they could serve for that as exploratory tools for developed researchers, like the one that we are developing in Cambridge, but also other teams, and also for as a tool that can be used for protecting, monitoring, etc. the cultural heritage. So now I will try to go quick in some small potential applications of this on how it can work. So I will start by the active floodplains, so the areas where the rivers are now moving. We move a bit west of the area, in the area of the city of the city is called Garcia-Molsosa. And so we see here, this is in one of the last floods in 2000, I don't know, the last big flood in this area in 2010, which shows a bit so how these areas work, no? How these floods can expand and occupy many parts of the territory. So what is interesting is that there is this city that was now it's 15 kilometers around. It's so the modern city is here, 15 kilometers of the active floodplain area, but in the past it was placed in the floodplain area. So it was interesting as an example of urban site that was within the active floodplain, because if you realize in the maps, the active floodplains doesn't have many archaeological data, and but we know that in the old floodplains there are, no. So at some point, many of the areas has been subject to these dynamics. So well, I just pointed to this paper that we published in 2019. And so here we examine how so this flooding of this area and the movement of the city from the old site to the new site happened in the early 20th century. So it was during when they were creating the Survey of India maps. So the process is actually cartographed in the map. So we can see here how the city disappear. We also realized that that didn't left many traces in the satellite imagery, so it would be really very difficult to see it using satellite imagery. That here there was an actual city. So it's something that if it was not for the maps and if it was not for the archaeological record, we wouldn't really have any archaeological data. It was also interesting to have a look, to go a bit through the historical sources and see how the management of these areas was working, no? And how they were using these active floodplains. So of course there was the construction of infrastructures, but it was interesting also the monitoring strategies. So they were actually trying to, for example, communicate from the upper river to the lower river when there was a flood coming, so people could go out, etc. And then the importance of mobility. So there was lots of reports of, for example, people who go to the active floodplain, they cultivate there for a time, and when the flood comes, they just go out. It was also an area where to bring herding, to bring the animals for herding, etc. So there was a lot of mobile strategies. What is interesting is that these mobile strategies were actually these documents are from the 19th century, so they document traditions of the late Mughal period and all this area, no? And so this is not so this is a mobilities that happen in a time of centralized and developed urban society. So it was not so. So this would be the picture in the active floodplains. So then, in the going through the old floodplains, I was just wanted to point a couple of examples of the dynamics that we can start to see. So there is a lot of work to do, of course, then in field work, in assessing, etc. But just from this remote data, we can start to say things, especially. So here, if we consider the chronology that was given by the previous surveys, no. Here you see separate the different sites for very broad chronologies: the Bronze Age, the historical, the medieval and early historical, and then the Mughal and later. So it is very interesting to see, for example, so we see that there are many later sites, so from the Mughal era, so especially from the Mughal era, in the around the area between the Old Beas and the Sultanate, especially around the Old Beas. While we don't see these sites in the area of the Multan plain, for example. So here we can start to think, well, what's going on, no? So if we read the historical sources, so we have this, for example, this interesting description of the Beas, no, this dry river area. So here we can realize that that it was an area that was abandoned probably at the so the Beas moved to the Sultanate apparently at the end of the 18th century, which is a time in which we document several river shiftings in this area. And what we see is that the presence of Mughal area sites in around this area, it's probably very related to this thing. So the movement of the river that abandoned this area at this point in the 18th century, so creates this archaeological record of sites that are from the period. So there was area occupied during this area that when there is no water, they start to be abandoned. And this is what they, in the 19th century, they talk of these areas abandoned with abandoned villages, etc. So since that didn't happen in the area of Multan, what we happen is probably that in Multan, the villages that existed at the late 18th century, they continue to be inhabited, and probably they are still inhabited. So we don't have this archaeological record. So this is just I just plot the distance from the river. So the sites from different periods, how far are from the paleo channels, And well, we can see that the later sites, the Mughal sites, are very strong related to the rivers. The early and medieval are more dispersed, and the Harappans tend to be a bit farther. That's because the sites of Harappan period in this area are usually found in the bar, so in the area that was not affected by the river for longer periods. So coming to the other area, in the area of Multan, what we see instead is a concentration of medieval sites. So in this case, if we look further, we see this Paleochannel of the Rabi. There are some historical accounts that some travelers said that the early medieval period, the Rabi River was east of Multan, and at some point in late medieval period, swift towards the west. So what we have here is a similar situation than in the BS, but an earlier one. And also it has this interesting network of which here are in red, of lineal features that seem related to this channel and to the medieval Multan, and also to the site. So they look like that. So it's lineal features, probably remains of inundation canals or things like that. And what is interesting is that we have here another case, no, of the swifting of the river and the creation of this archaeological landscape. So I'm finished now and just go back to this general map just to recap. So the idea is that we can start to do this mapping at a large scale. So these applications can allow us to obtain these data sets, these very large data sets. And but on the other side, it's very important to note the importance of this regional and more micro-regional approach to understand the dynamics. So we can start to use this to provide long-term hypothesis of how could have been worked all these dynamics between the rivers and the settlement, and the importance of the diachronic approach, because this is dynamics that build on top of each other, and also the different landscape characterizations of the different areas. And for that, I finish here. I just so this is I'll put just an email if someone wants to contact me. And this is a couple of yet also a couple of links to the web page of our research group in Tarragona, and a web page that in which we are basically concentrating all these the results of this research. And well, thank you very much for